top story tonight, President Joe Biden is no longer seeking re-election less than a month before the Democratic National Convention and about 3.5 months before the general election. Thanks for choosing King 5 tonight. I'm Madison Wade. President Biden has endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris as the new party nominee. No word yet on who her running mate would be, but this has opened the door to a lot of questions tonight on the future of the Democratic Party. King 5 has you covered. Tonight we have team coverage with local analysts, voters, state party chairs, and a presidential historian. Let's take a live look over the White House tonight. We begin in Washington, D.C. with Alice Barr walking us through the latest on the president's withdrawal from the race.
President Biden today making the seismic decision to step out of the 2024 race for the White House, bringing an abrupt end to a half-century career in politics after a disastrous 90-minute debate raised serious questions about the 81-year-old's fitness for another term in office. In a statement posted on X, the president writing, quote, "It has been the greatest honor of my life to serve as your president, and while it has been my intention to seek re-election, I believe it is in the best interest of my party and the country for me to stand down and to focus solely on fulfilling my duties as president for the remainder of my term." Mr. Biden then endorsed his vice president, Kamala Harris, for the nomination as the party scrambles to change course before next month's Democratic National Convention with just 4 months until the November election. One of the president's closest allies, Senator Chris Coons, reacting.
He has always put our country first. He has an incredible legacy of service and leadership.
In her own statement, Vice President Harris thanking the president for his service and his endorsement and saying it's her intention to earn and win this nomination and unite the Democratic Party. The news caps a tumultuous week, beginning with the attempted assassination of former President Trump. And after weeks of pressure from Democratic lawmakers increasingly anxious, Mr. Biden could not defeat Mr. Trump. The former president slammed President Biden in an interview with NBC News as the race hits an historic reset.
I don't know. I think that's this scary part of it all, is that we just don't know what anything's going to happen.
Propelling the nation into unknown territory. While President Biden has endorsed Vice President Harris, he cannot just hand her the delegates that he won during the primaries. They can still make their own choice. And while we've started to see a rush to back the vice president, someone else can still challenge for the nomination. In Washington, Alice Barr, NBC News.
With President Joe Biden not seeking re-election, we are hearing from voters tonight who are now speculating about what comes next for the Democratic Party and for the nation. King 5 Sebastian Robertson begins our team coverage for us tonight. Sebastian.
Well, President Biden's decision announced Sunday morning comes after weeks of urging by high-ranking Democrats over his health and recent debate performance. Many feared he was simply too old to serve another term as president. And today, Biden, in that letter to voters, in a way, appeared to agree.
My gut feeling is this is probably a good thing.
Why?
Because personally, I think there should be an upper limit on age for presidents. I don't think anybody should run after they're 70.
But like we all know, his health has been a question, so it's maybe a good thing at the same time. Maybe it's a blessing in disguise.
President Joe Biden will serve the rest of his term, but will not seek re-election. The first president to do so since Lyndon B. Johnson in 1968.
That was quite a sacrifice and quite a courageous act by President Biden to basically end his political career, to acknowledge that there were doubts about his capability to continue to lead for the next 4 years.
At 81 years old, Biden, the oldest serving U.S. president, was criticized for public gaffes. Critics calling into question his ability to lead for another 4 years.
Yeah, he's not what he was. I've seen videos of him for the last 10 years, and it seems like he's going down pretty fast.
Democrats now scrambling with their national convention less than a month away, and Election Day just over 100 days away.
I think that it was the cumulative weight of Democratic voices calling on him to preserve his legacy, get out of the race, and give the Democrats a chance to win, or at least to not get blown out in the congressional races as well as in the presidential race.
Voters on both sides had many opinions on the decision, but I have to say the one thing they were not was surprised. There was a sense that this decision was inevitable. It was just a question of when. Madison.
Sebastian, thank you. Our team coverage continues now with Cornelius Hawker. And Cornelius, you talked to the leader of Washington State's Democrats about their message to voters moving forward.
Yeah, Madison, the chair of the state Democratic Party made it clear they're going to focus on the wins they believe the Biden-Harris administration has delivered and what's at stake if voters don't choose Democrats in the fall.
A little grief at the decision of the president to not move forward, but a lot of excitement and energy.
Mixed emotions today for Washington Democratic Chair Shasti Conrad with the bombshell news of President Joe Biden dropping out of the race.
I know that this has not been an easy time for the Democratic Party writ large to sort of grapple with, who will be leading our party.
If President Biden has his way, Vice President Kamala Harris will replace him. To get voters behind a Harris-led ticket, Chair Conrad says they must focus on key priorities, part of the Biden-Harris administration.
Abortion rights are on the ballot, supporting climate change action. We've had unprecedented job growth and low unemployment numbers. We are continuing to demonstrate that we are the party of freedom and of rights, that we are standing up for women, for LGBTQ plus IA folks, that we are standing up for people of color. Like, we're doing the work.
Versus how she sees the Republican plan for America if they win.
We just had a week of listening to the very dark vision of a future that the Republicans under Trump are putting forth, and we cannot turn that back.
Now, although Vice President Harris is not the official nominee, Chair Conrad says she believes the party will quickly get behind Harris because they don't have too much time for in-party fighting. Madison.
Cornelius, thank you. We also spoke with the state Republican Party chair tonight. Jim Walsh tells King 5 it's not a surprise, but it is troubling. He emphasized that key policy issues will drive voters to the polls.
Elections are always about cycles. That's why the process of our elections are important to defend and maintain. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And this latest news from Joe Biden is late in the game, the political game, it's true. But in the end, I think issues and policy are what really drive people's thinking about how they're going to vote.
And reaction is still rolling in from the Democratic Party tonight. Representative Adam Smith with the state's 9th district writing, quote, "I applaud President Joe Biden for making this difficult choice. I think it is the best path forward for our country." Congresswoman Kim Schreier adding, quote, "By passing the torch to a new generation of leaders, President Biden sets an inspiring example of putting country above self." And finally, Representative Pramila Jayapal writing, quote, "I know President Biden's decision to step aside this election comes after careful and deliberative consideration of the best path forward to win the House, the Senate, and White House and protect our democracy." Jayapal also shared on social media tonight that Vice President Harris called her this afternoon. She says that she told Harris that she is 1,000% in for her to be our president. We've reached out to her office to learn more about the context of that phone call. Once we learn more, we'll be sure to let you know. Also, we are joined now by presidential historian Rick Checkman now to discuss the unprecedented announcement. Rick, thank you for joining us live on King 5. Let's talk about the magnitude of this announcement today, first and foremost.
It doesn't get any bigger. This is like earthquake 6.0, 7.0, 8.0. I don't know how high it goes, but it goes that high. Look, nobody is shocked by what's happened, and yet at the same time we are shocked because we've never seen this happen before. Joe Biden at this late stage in the election cycle leaving, wow, never happened before.
We are seeing a lot of people drawing comparison to 56 years ago about Lyndon B. Johnson in 1968. Is history repeating itself here?
History really isn't repeating itself because Johnson did this back in March, so this was really still giving the Democratic Party plenty of time to be able to select a new nominee. If you remember, Ezra Klein back in February in the New York Times penned this very famous, some people thought it was an infamous op-ed at the time, saying Joe Biden needs to quit the race. And there was all this shock. Wow. Well, if he had done it back then, okay, that would have been similar to 1968. But here, we're only 4 months out. We're 6 months from the next inauguration. This is a very compact schedule.
And we know Kamala Harris has been tapped to be, the endorsement for Joe Biden, possibly the nominee for the Democratic Party, possibly president come November. She's already broken barriers for being the first Black woman and South Asian woman to be vice president. Talk about the history of her as a pick for possibly the president.
Well, she's kind of like Obama and Hillary Clinton combined, right? She would be the first woman president. She would be the first Black woman president who's also got an Asian background. So she's breaking barriers left and right if she wins this nomination and then goes on to the White House. So it's absolutely historic. You can tell when her obit gets written, the first line is going to be all these barriers that she has broken should she become the actual president of the United States.
And we've seen the Clintons endorsing her tonight, many other notable lawmakers as well endorsing her. Obama did also put out a statement today, but notably absent from his statement was any mention of Kamala Harris. Is that significant? Is that a concern?
I don't think it's a concern. I don't think it's significant. He needs to be the party unifier. So he is coming in like George Washington. He's not going to pick sides. We are going to have to, as Democrats, are going to have to unite. Well, they won't be able to unite if everybody's barking at each other. So at some point, whoever the candidate is, presumably it's going to be Kamala Harris. I don't see anybody else with enough support. But if it's somebody else or it's her, there's going to be hurt feelings all around. Obama's going to come in. He'll probably show up at the convention. He'll put his arm around whoever the nominee is. And because he won't be associated with one side or the other, he's going to be a unifying force. That's the role he has set out for himself in this fight.
And Obama calling President Biden a consequential leader for the free world. Also today,
and he's right. He's right. Yeah, Obama's absolutely right. Joe Biden has been one of the most consequential presidents. And I have to say I was wrong. When he became president and he had this very slim Democratic majority, I said, okay, he's not really going to accomplish very much. Because the only time Democratic presidents have ever gotten big legislation passed was when they had overwhelming majorities in Congress. That was Woodrow Wilson during the New Freedom. That was Franklin Roosevelt during the New Deal. That was Lyndon Johnson during the Great Society. None of the other Democratic presidents have ever been able to push a lot of social legislation or big economic legislation through the Congress without that overwhelming majority. Biden somehow did it. That makes him an amazing president.
Yeah, and tonight we're talking about him being in the history books years and years from now. You were saying before we had our interview here that will be the same for his obit too.
Sure, exactly. I mean, I hate to be talking about people's obits here. There's nobody dying right now, but it's a way of putting things in perspective. So Joe Biden has just written the first line of his obituary, which will be the man who decided to step away from the presidential election and not run for a second term. In all of our history, we've only had one president who did that, and that was Polk back in the early pre-antebellum, pre-Civil War days of the 19th century in the 1840s. Most Americans have never even heard of James K. Polk. He did it. Nobody before him, nobody since him, in other words, a president who could have won the nomination, stepped away. Wow. So this is big. This is big.
Yeah, a significant day for sure. Rick, thank you so much for joining us live to give us context and perspective to what is a day that will be absolutely in history books.
Sure, you bet.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you.
Well, we conducted a recent poll as well. What should happen should President Biden withdraw? Before today's announcement, a little more than half thought the party should nominate Vice President Kamala Harris. We now know the nomination has not happened, but President Joe Biden has endorsed her. Now, Harris polls about the same as Biden with just slightly better advantage against former President Donald Trump, but still within that margin of error. It's important to note this was conducted before the attempted assassination on former President Trump. The survey was conducted in partnership with the Seattle Times and UW's Center for an Informed Public. To see more of our poll results, text the word poll to 206-448-4545. We'll send you a link.